My name is Dana Whitmore. I'm 33 years old. Shut your mouth, my mom screams. You're embarrassing yourself again. She says it loud enough for every fork to pause every sip of champagne to hang in midair. Conversations don't fade, they stop like a pulled plug. The silence falls hard. We're in the Hyatt Regency Ballroom downtown, all polished brass and pale carpet. Red, white, and blue flags behind the stage. Rows of white-clothed tables in a half moon. A string quartet playing soft renditions of military marches in the corner. I'm standing at the far side near the seafood display, not even close to the mic. But apparently I still ruined her moment. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. Mom adjusts the collar on her silk blazer like she didn't just raise her voice in front of two colonels and a full table of officers. You should have stayed home, Dana. Across the ballroom, a man near the head table sets down his glass. Stars on his lapel. Major General. He looks at me. Hard. Then slowly he stands, and what he does next makes the entire room freeze. I feel the weight before I understand the meaning. The general doesn't speak. Doesn't signal. He just rises. The tension that follows him is silent, but it carries like thunder. My mother falters. She's still facing me, but her hand drops fingers clenching the linen napkin tighter than she means to. To my left, my cousin Lauren shifts in her officer whites. The smile on her face flickers. She doesn't know what's happening yet. None of them do. I can hear someone whisper near the buffet line just a name passed from mouth to mouth like a warning Whitmore. The man in uniform takes a step forward. Just one. I lower my eyes, not in shame in practice. Stillness is something you learn when you've spent years being watched but never truly seen. The room doesn't breathe. No one has moved, not the officer who was refilling his water, not the distant aunt gripping her wine glass tighter, not the boy playing with his napkin rings. Even the pianist's fingers float above the keys, unsure if they're allowed to touch the music again. My mom turns her head slightly. She finally notices the silence isn't following her, it's orbiting something else. I didn't mean she starts, but it's too late. A single voice breaks through. Permission to approach Ma'am the General. His voice is calm, measured, but those 7 words hit like cannon fire. Someone at Lauren's table gasps audibly. Another clinks their wine glass, then sets it down too fast. I don't flinch. My mom swivels. You must have me confused with someone. He doesn't look at her. He walks toward me. Each step measured, deliberate. It's not ceremony. It's not theater. It's recognition. And suddenly, every detail in the room feels sharp. The cold air from the vent against the back of my neck. The faint sweetness of the roses near the podium. The muted clatter of someone dropping a shrimp fork and pretending they didn't. Ms. Whitmore, the general says. His tone is different now. Lower, not questioning, affirming. He stops just 2 feet from me and salutes. Not casually, not out of politeness. A crisp, formal, full-body salute. And now, no one can pretend they don't see me. No one moves, not even my mother. Especially not her. The air holds. No one claps, no one speaks. The general drops the salute. His eyes are kind, but there's a flicker behind them. A memory, maybe. Something we both know but won't name here. He doesn't need to say it, and I won't. I nod once. Barely. He doesn't press, just turns slowly and walks back to his table. Lauren is frozen. Her commanding officer beside her has stood halfway. He sits back down like someone pushed him. I still haven't moved. Neither has my mother. Dana, she says finally, her voice dry. What was that? I turn to look at her, really look. I see the lines she tries to hide with concealer, the way she holds her chin like armor. I see the fear now, and confusion, but not the kind she'll admit. She's not asking what the general did. She's asking, what are you hiding? But I'm not hiding anything. Not anymore. A woman brushes past, catching my shoulder gently. Excuse me, she whispers. It's the general's aide. She leans in, not bothering to whisper this next part, ma'am. He'd like a word. If you're ready. I nod. Just once. I walk away without looking back. The string quartet starts again, a beat too slow, like they're catching up to the moment. My heels click against the floor steady. Each step away from my mother feels like reclaiming something I forgot was mine. I don't smile. I don't speak. But somewhere deep in my chest, something exhales, like silence finally gave me permission. I wasn't always invisible, but it's easier that way. My mother, Marlene Whitmore, never liked attention unless it made her look good. She wore judgment like pearls, elegant, expensive, and heavy. You didn't see it at first, but once you stood too close, it choked you. She raised me with rules, not boundaries rules. Speak clearly, not loudly. Walk with purpose, but not pride. Be graceful, not strong. And never, ever draw attention unless you're dressed for it. By age 10, I knew how to iron pleats into silence. By 15, I learned to disappear while standing in the same room. We lived in Helena, Montana, in a gray two-story that smelled like lemon cleaner and dried roses. My dad died when I was 12. Heart attack. Quick, efficient, clean like everything else in our house. Mom didn't mourn. She rearranged the living room and moved on. She told me often, "You're plain Dana, not ugly, not special. Don't make people uncomfortable by pretending to be more." So I didn't. In school, I never joined sports, never ran for anything. I got straight A's quietly. I watched other girls raise their hands, their voices, their dreams. I folded mine smaller each year. I got into Georgetown. She called it a phase. She never visited. I don't think she believed I stayed all 4 years. But I did. I stayed, I studied, I worked, and I disappeared. Then came the offer. The kind that doesn't come in the mail. No recruiter, no brochure. Just a quiet call, a long interview, and a job no one can confirm exists. It was the first time someone looked at my silence and said, "Useful." But I never told her. She thought I was doing freelance language work, translating manuals in DC. That's what she told her bridge club. "Dana works with documents. It's boring. Poor thing." She said it like a condolence. I was 25 the last time she hugged me without fixing my hair mid-embrace. Now I'm 33, and she still asks the same questions over speakerphone. "Any men in your life?" "No. Still doing that lonely little contract job?" "Yes." She sighs. "You know it's not too late to learn bookkeeping." Something normal. The irony is almost funny. I've briefed colonels. I've debriefed assets. I've walked out of embassies wearing identities so thin I forgot my real one. But to her, I'm the girl who forgot to smile. Still single, still strange, and worst of all, still showing up. She never wanted me at the ceremony. "I just don't think it's appropriate," she said last week, smoothing her voice into sweetness. "It's for Lauren. People will be wearing uniforms. Maybe, don't come in your usual clothes." She didn't know what she was asking. I almost stayed away. But the letter arrived 2 days before a name handwritten in cursive. No return address, just a seal pressed faint into the envelope. It was from someone I hadn't seen in 5 years, someone who knew who I was, and it ended with 7 typed words. "If you go, he'll stand for you." I burned the letter after reading it twice. But I packed my blazer anyway. I didn't expect my mother to make a scene. But I wasn't surprised. What surprised me, what broke something I didn't know I still protected, was how easy it was for her. In front of rows of uniformed men, in the hush of a military memorial, on soil where names are carved into stone, she still found space to say, "You don't belong here." And I almost believed her. The worst part wasn't that she yelled. It was that no one stopped her. Not one aunt looked uncomfortable. Not one cousin shifted in their seat. Even Lauren, flushed and straight-backed in her white uniform, didn't move. They just watched. Some of them even smirked, like they'd been waiting for it, like I deserved it. "You're always doing this," my mom had said once years ago in the middle of Easter dinner, "looking like you know something no one else does. It's condescending, Dana. Don't act above your station." Above my station. That was the phrase. She loved it. Said it the way her grandmother used to when someone wore heels too tall or lipstick too red. When a woman forgot her place. I started to forget mine once. Back when I came home from college and brought her a scarf from Jordan. I thought she'd like the embroidery, deep blue thread, delicate work. She held it up and said, "Cheap fabric, probably mass-produced." I folded it back into my bag. That's when I stopped bringing gifts. Then I stopped bringing stories. By the time I was 30, I stopped bringing myself, except when required. Family deaths, major holidays, Lauren's milestones, like this one. Lauren, the golden niece, the one who did it right. ROTC med school, an officer and a future orthopedic surgeon. Polished, polite, predictable. Everything I wasn't. I didn't resent her, not exactly. I just knew I'd never be allowed to stand near her without reminding them all what I wasn't. Even when I tried. Even when I kept my voice low and my makeup neutral and wore what they wanted, safe colors, soft shoes, nothing loud. Still, they found ways to cut me out. Like the group photo from 2 Thanksgivings ago, I was standing right next to Lauren, but when the photo went up online, I was cropped out. Clean. Or the bridal shower last summer. No one told me the theme was lavender. I showed up in navy blue. My mom looked at me like I'd crashed a funeral. "Oh, Dana," she sighed. "You just never fit, do you?" No one corrected her. They let her say it. They let it stay. It wasn't just moments they took. It was place, voice, identity. Every time I spoke up, there'd be a sigh, a sideways glance, a change of subject. Once, when I tried to mention my work vaguely carefully at a backyard barbecue, my uncle barked a laugh and said, "Still doing that ghost job, CIA analyst, please." Dana files spreadsheets in a basement. They all laughed. So I laughed too. Then I got in my car and drove 6 hours back to DC that same night with my plate of untouched potato salad still wrapped in foil on the passenger seat. They didn't notice I left. Or if they did, no one called. Not even Mom. I learned eventually that some families don't exile you in one dramatic break. They just erase you. One memory at a time. By the time you notice, you're already gone, but still expected to show up, smile, sit, stay quiet. Lauren's ceremony was the first time I refused to shrink. I wore my own suit, sharp-tailored charcoal gray. Not loud, just clean. I stood by the shrimp tray, said nothing, did nothing, and even that was too much, because presence for people like me is a threat. My mother didn't scream because I disrupted the ceremony. She screamed because I dared to exist in it, because I didn't ask permission, because I didn't apologize. When the general stood, that was the moment everything cracked. But the fracture had been forming for years. All they needed was a little noise to break it wide open. And they chose my mother to make it. I didn't leave right after the ceremony. That would have looked too dramatic. So I stayed. I smiled at the people who wouldn't meet my eyes. I made small talk with a woman who thought I was someone's assistant. I said thank you when they handed me cake. Then I slipped out quietly the way I'd come in. The sky over Arlington had turned a deep gray by then. Not storming, just heavy. Like something waiting to fall. I walked the edge of the parking lot and sat on the low concrete border near a patch of freshly planted hydrangeas, the kind with soft blue petals and perfect symmetry, and I waited for the noise to fade from my head. But it didn't. Her voice echoed like it had been wired through a speaker. "You should have stayed home. You never fit. Shut your mouth." Words like glass pressed beneath skin, not deep, but constant. Sharp enough to make you flinch when you move. I watched people walk by, laughing. Dignitaries in uniform, family members wrapped in flag pins and pearls. I watched Lauren hug 3 different officers, her voice bright, her body language open. She looked like someone who belonged. I looked like an accident, a silence that wandered too close to the microphone. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the wind to shift. Long enough for my hands to turn cold. No one came to look for me, and I didn't expect them to. I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos, something I only do when I'm unraveling. There weren't many with me in them, just images I'd taken of airports and sunrises and strangers smiling behind glass. I stopped on one from Kandahar, just dust and boots and a corner of folded flag barely enough for anyone else to understand. But I remember the moment. I remember the heat, the silence before the plane landed, the soldier who handed me a pen without making eye contact, the lieutenant who nodded once and said, "We'll brief you in the tent, ma'am." They never knew my name, but they trusted me, And still sitting there beside those hydrangeas dress shoes scuffed coat collar askew, I felt like a fraud. Because none of them knew. Not my mother, not Lauren, not anyone at that reception hall. And if no one knows what you've done, did it really matter? The thought curled cold around my ribs. Maybe they're right, I heard myself think. Maybe I am strange. Maybe I am the problem, the distance, the silence, the constant need to stay outside the frame. Maybe all these years of secrecy weren't about duty. Maybe they were about fear. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it tasted like iron. The problem with silence is that it doesn't just protect you. It starts to convince you that you're not worth hearing. And in that moment, sitting alone while the ceremony wound down without me, I wanted nothing more than to vanish completely. No more family events, no more pretending, no more rooms I wasn't allowed to belong in. Just a clean cut. Just gone. I stayed there until the sky dimmed, until my phone buzzed once with a reminder, B12 injection, 6 p.m. sharp. That's what brought me back, not the pain, not even the memory, just a calendar alert, something small and ordinary reminding me that I existed in a system, that I still had a body, that I was real. I stood up slowly, my legs tingled. A man in a dark suit was walking past the edge of the lot, civilian, clean-shaven, eyes scanning the field like he wasn't looking for anyone and yet still saw everything. He paused when he passed me, nodded once, then kept walking. I never saw him again, but that nod, simple, flat, unbothered, felt more grounding than anything that day, like a thread tugging me back, not into joy, not into power, just back into myself. I drove home in silence, didn't turn on the radio, didn't stop for coffee, didn't call anyone. That night I didn't go back to my mother's house, or to the hotel. I drove past the exits, past the city, past the doubt, straight to a place that still remembered me, even if my family never did Fort Meade. I slept in the car outside the gates, and when the sun came up, I knew where I needed to begin again. I took off the blazer and laid it across a chair, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not loud, not messy. Just a quiet, steady grief for the years I'd spent asking for less than I deserved. I didn't wake up the next morning with a plan. I woke up with sore eyes and aching jaw and the bitter aftertaste of swallowing my voice for too many years. But something had shifted. It wasn't anger. It was precision. I made coffee the way I always do, French press, 3 minutes, no sugar. I sat on the windowsill in my apartment in Alexandria, letting the early sunlight warm the backs of my hands. And I breathed. Not deeply, not dramatically. Just enough to feel like I still knew how. It took me 3 days just to open my laptop. Another week to email a name I hadn't typed since Afghanistan. I didn't plan revenge. I planned clarity. Then I opened the drawer, the one I almost never touch. Inside a flat black ID badge with no agency name, a stack of encrypted USBs, and a coin. The coin wasn't currency. It was a challenge coin heavy etched with a falcon mid-dive and 6 words in Latin that only a few hundred people in the country could translate correctly. I turned it between my fingers, felt its weight. It didn't ask me to fight. It reminded me I already had. That week, I requested reassignment. Not away from danger toward it. Away from the comfort of quiet, away from the shadows where I'd hidden not just from the world, but from myself. My supervisor didn't blink. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and handed me a sealed packet. 1 week later, I was standing in a windowless room in Tampa, staring at a secure whiteboard reviewing a risk grid labeled Red Ridge Protocol. Phase 4. The details don't matter here. Only this, when you're trusted with information that could tilt the axis of decision-making in global strategy, you learn to speak only when it changes outcomes. That's the kind of power I carried. And for too long, I'd let people think I was just a disappointment in a black blazer. Not anymore. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't need to. Power doesn't announce itself. It just acts. So I worked. Quietly, precisely. In rooms where no one had time for ego, where my gender, my name, my family didn't matter, only the clarity of my analysis, the stakes of my recommendations. In those weeks, I coordinated 3 cross-agency briefs, presented to a joint task leadership cell, flagged 1 internal security breach before it reached the field, got 2 separate code word level commendations, and not once did I raise my voice. I didn't need to. On the 3rd week, I got a message, not on a phone, not on email. It came through a back channel, a digital breadcrumb placed inside a secure protocol stream. I found it during a routine clearance sweep. Someone had embedded it inside a geofence report tied to Arlington Memorial access logs. It read, "If you ever need the room to remember, I'll be there." No name, no signature. But I recognized the pattern. The general. He hadn't forgotten. That wasn't ceremony back at the memorial. That was acknowledgement. And something more. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I no longer needed it. Recognition is not the same as validation. One is earned. The other is begged for. I wasn't begging anymore. In between assignments, I cleaned out my personal files, old photo albums, handwritten letters, postcards from places I could never admit visiting, and 1 envelope buried beneath the rest, marked with my mother's looping script, "Dana," for when you stop pretending. I hadn't seen it in years. She gave it to me after graduation, Georgetown 2012. I'd tucked it away out of spite. Now I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Blank. No message, no signature, nothing. I stared at it for a long time, and for the first time in a decade, I smiled, because it was perfect, because it said exactly what she always meant. And now, it said exactly what I needed it to say. She gave me silence. I returned it with interest. 2 days later, I got the formal request to attend Lauren's promotion dinner. Short notice. My mother's name wasn't on the invitation. It came from Lauren's commanding officer's office. Apparently, there was a military liaison flying in, though no one knew why. I did. They weren't coming for Lauren. They were coming for the record. I didn't RSVP. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't even buy a new dress. I just had my coin cleaned. The briefing room smelled of old air and newer tension. It was colder than I remembered, even with the polished wood panels and the expensive digital displays ticking away at the back. I hadn't been here in years long before the party before the shame. Back when I was only the extra niece, the quiet one, the outsider with a clearance badge. Now I sat across from a woman I once called Aunt Patricia. Her glasses were perched perfectly on the bridge of her nose, her mouth a practiced line, and beside her were my cousins Eli Smug in a tailored gray suit and Madeline, who had folded her hands like she owned the air between us. I waited. No small talk. No one asked why I was called in. That wasn't their style, not with me. The door clicked. Then he walked in. Colonel Anders, U.S. Strategic Reconnaissance Division, starched uniform, silver wings, quiet eyes that had seen too many war zones to be impressed by boardroom bravado. The air shifted, subtle but sharp. He didn't look at them. He looked at me. And he nodded once. "Asset confirmed," he said, as if reading coordinates. Madeline's hand twitched. "What is this?" Eli demanded, already standing. Colonel Anders didn't flinch. "This is a reclamation, Mr. Hart. The files your firm held encrypted with federal military overlays were never yours to present to international partners." Aunt Patricia's voice cracked in. "You can't be serious. We signed a delegation clause with delegation requires authorization. She's the only person who held command rights on the coding series labeled Aquila Shadow. The rest of you were never cleared." Silence. Even the air conditioning stopped humming, it seemed. I slowly reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the object I hadn't touched in months, a small, plain black USB drive. I laid it flat on the table and pushed it forward without a word. "What's that?" Eli asked. I looked him in the eye. "The original. Time-stamped before your firm tried to patent it." His face reddened. There's no way you could still have Colonel Anders cut in." "We tracked the backup key. She never surrendered control." "We confirmed during the Albania intercept." Madeline stared at me like seeing something alien. "You were in Albania." I said nothing. The colonel gave the briefest nod again, like punctuation. "She's not your junior anymore. She's our field-level tactical linguist, embedded during crisis ops. You don't get to use her work anymore." Then he opened his briefcase. No fanfare. Just a clean rustle of paper. He slid a single sheet toward Patricia. A copy went to Eli. Another to Madeline. I knew the letterhead. It was from the Department of Defense. The top read Immediate Cease and Desist, Strategic Technologies Misappropriation. Below it, in sharp black ink, my name, my full name. Savannah R. Kim, Civilian Asset, 0721G. Primary Developer, Aquila Shadow Series. My aunt went pale. Her mouth opened once, closed again. Madeline just stared at the signature. Why does it say lead analyst next to your name? Colonel Anders answered for me. Because she was, and still is. Eli was shaking his head. No, this doesn't make sense. She wasn't even at the last meeting. She wasn't supposed to. She wasn't invited, the colonel corrected, but she built what you sold. And you didn't even know what you had. That's over now. He turned to me quiet again. Asset retrieval complete. Ready for briefing when you are. I stood finally. My legs were steady. For the first time since that awful night, since the slap, the shutdown, the betrayal, I let myself look at each of them in turn. Not with anger, with clarity. They had taken everything from me, but only for a while, because they never truly knew what they were trying to bury. I turned toward the colonel. Let's go. He nodded once. As we walked out, I heard my name from behind. Patricia's voice unsteady, desperate. Savannah, we can talk about this. But I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I had given them years. Now I walked in silence, no apologies, no drama. Just quiet power. Because they finally saw me. And it was already too late. I stood there, briefcase still in my hands, though I no longer needed it. The colonel had said everything for me, not just with the words, but the way he stood silent, firm in the space that used to shrink me down. The air around him had shifted something in the room. No one spoke. Even my brother. He was pale, uncertain fingers twitching like he wanted to undo something, but there was nothing left to undo. Thank you, I whispered to Colonel Ryan. He nodded once. Quietly, like a man used to leading teams that didn't shout, just moved. And then he left. Just like that. No handshake, no fanfare. Just purpose boots quiet on the marble floor. I didn't need to say a word to the others, not after that. I walked out past the dining table where I wasn't allowed to sit, past the birthday cake they hadn't let me touch, past the cousins who used to yank on my hair when the adults weren't looking. Someone, I think Aunt Michelle, said my name as I reached the front door. But I didn't turn. For once, I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was leaving. Outside, the sun had already sunk behind the tree line. That kind of orange sky that makes even broken things look golden. I walked to my car. No shaking. No tears. I'd lost years here. Let their voices burrow into my mind. Let them convince me I wasn't enough. But tonight, a single piece of paper from a classified unit placed carefully in a colonel's hands had returned what they tried to strip away. No, not returned, confirmed. Because deep down, I had never stopped doing the work. I had never stopped learning, never stopped trying. They hadn't known. That was the point. They didn't deserve to know. Not until now. Not until someone who outranked all of them in ways they couldn't comprehend walked into their house and said, "She's not yours to belittle." I passed the oak trees lining the gravel drive. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat, 2 missed calls from my brother, 1 from Dad. I turned it face down. They weren't ready to understand. And I wasn't going to teach them anymore. There's a freedom in that. A quiet power. 3 weeks later, I was in Poland again. Not in uniform, not even on duty. But this time when I walked into that room full of global analysts, I stood at the front. Not because someone invited me up, but because I belonged there. The woman in the red blazer at the back, she looked familiar. It was Dr. Olszewska, the one who had interviewed me 4 years ago and said I was too quiet, too soft-spoken for field intelligence. Now she nodded to me and waited for me to speak. "Let's begin," I said simply. And back home, I don't know what they say about me now. I don't ask. That chapter is closed. The file is sealed. The briefcase is locked. The weight is gone. And I never looked back.